What if the most advanced materials technology ever developed by human hands was invented over 1,000 years ago, and then simply vanished? Not stolen, not hidden, just gone. Because the last man who knew how to do it died before anyone thought to ask him. This is that story. Who were these masters? Before we talk about what was lost, we need to understand what actually existed. Because the word blacksmith carries the wrong image for most people. Rough man, simple hammer, basic steps. Forget that image completely. The masters of the past were operating at the intersection of engineering, chemistry, and art, centuries before any of those disciplines had a name. In feudal Japan, a master swordsmith was not just a craftsman. He was a consecrated figure. Before entering the forge, he underwent ritual purification. He wore ceremonial robes. He treated every stage of the forging process as a religious act. Because for him, the blade was not an object. It was a living thing. Something that carried spirit inside the metal. And that belief was not just cultural decoration. It produced a discipline of attention, a level of presence and precision during the work, that had direct consequences for the quality of the final blade. Halfway across the world, the men producing what we now call Damascus steel were doing something that stumped modern metallurgists for over 100 years. They were creating blades with flowing patterns visible on the surface, patterns that formed not from any decorative technique, but from deep inside the molecular structure of the metal itself. And in Europe, in the great workshops of Milan, Augsburg, and Greenwich, armorers were solving problems that belong in a mechanical engineering textbook. How do you build a suit of plate armor weighing 30 kilograms? That still allows a man to roll on the ground, stand up, and keep fighting? That question has a real answer. And the men who found it did so without computers, without instruments, without equations. Just fire, hammers, generations of accumulated knowledge, and hands that knew what the mind could not yet articulate. These were not simple people doing simple things. They were at the absolute edge of what human capability could achieve with the tools available. And almost all of it is gone. The first loss, Damascus steel. Let's start with the most famous case. Damascus steel. Those flowing patterns on the surface of the blade, twisting lines moving through the metal like water frozen inside iron, have fascinated people for centuries. But here is something most people don't know. The Damascus steel being produced today is not the same thing as the original. The modern version, created by folding different types of steel together and then etching the surface, is beautiful work, genuinely impressive craft. But the original Damascus, called wood steel, was fundamentally different. Think of it this way. If you want to create a marble effect on a piece of paper, you can either take different colored inks and swirl them together on the surface, or you can use a paper that develops that pattern naturally as the material dries and settles. Modern Damascus is the first method. Original woods was the second. The pattern wasn't applied to the surface. It grew from inside the metal during forging. It formed because of specific trace elements present in the raw iron ore, elements like vanadium, chromium, and tungsten, that caused carbon to organize itself into visible crystalline structures during the forging process. The masters who worked this steel had no knowledge of chemistry. They didn't know what vanadium was. They couldn't have named the process that was happening inside the metal. But they knew this. When you work this specific or at this specific heat with this specific rhythm of hammer strikes, something extraordinary happens to the surface. That knowledge was real. It worked reliably. It produced blades that were sharper, tougher, and more visually striking than anything their competitors could make. And then, sometime around the mid-1700s, the ore sources that carried those trace elements were depleted. New ore arrived from different deposits. It looked identical. It behaved almost the same in most stages of the process. But it didn't carry those invisible ingredients. And without them, the technique stopped producing results. The knowledge didn't disappear because the masters forgot it or kept it secret. It disappeared because the specific material that made it possible no longer existed. And no one had ever written down why the process worked in the first place. They knew that it worked. They had never needed to understand why. In 2006, a team of German researchers from Dresden University analyzed antique Damascus blades using electron microscopes. Inside the steel at the nanoscale, they found something that stopped them cold. Carbon nanotubes. Structures that we associate with 21st century materials science. Structures that were first described and named in scientific literature in 1991, were present inside blades forged in the 14th and 15th centuries. Not placed there deliberately. Not understood by the men who made them, but produced naturally as a byproduct of working the right or at the right temperature in the right way. The masters of Damascus steel had been producing nanotechnology for centuries, without knowing the word, without knowing the concept, guided only by accumulated knowledge of what good results looked and felt like. That is the scale of what was lost when the ore ran out. The second loss, the Japanese tradition. Japan tells a different kind of story. Because the knowledge of making tamahagane, the steel at the heart of the Japanese sword tradition, was not completely lost. It survived. But the margin between survival and extinction was razor thin. And understanding exactly how close it came to disappearing reveals something important about how all of this knowledge actually works. For centuries, the Japanese blade-making tradition was held in place by three interlocking forces. Think of it as a three-legged structure. The first leg was economic demand. The samurai class needed swords constantly, and they were willing to pay extraordinary prices for the finest work. That demand created full-time masters and full-time apprentices. It made the craft economically sustainable across generations. The second leg was the transmission system. Knowledge passed through hereditary lineages and formal schools, from father to son, or from a master to a carefully chosen apprentice. Over 10, 15, sometimes 20 years of direct hands-on instruction. An apprentice didn't read about forging. He watched it, felt it, failed at it, and was corrected thousands of times over many years. The third leg was cultural and religious status. A master swordsmith occupied a protected and respected position in Japanese society. The blade was a sacred object. The craft that produced it carried genuine spiritual weight. Remove any one of those three legs and the structure falls. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration removed all three simultaneously. Japan modernized rapidly and deliberately, opening to Western technology and industry. The samurai class was abolished by government decree. Carrying swords in public was made illegal. Western-produced steel weapons replaced traditional blades in military use almost overnight. The economic demand collapsed. The schools closed because there were no paying commissions to sustain them. The cultural status evaporated as Japan deliberately reframed its own identity around modernization. Most swordsmiths simply found other work. By the early 20th century, the number of men still practicing traditional swordsmithing in Japan had fallen from thousands to dozens. The Tatara furnaces, those enormous traditional smelters that required teams of workers and ran continuously for 4 days consuming tons of charcoal, went cold. After the Second World War, Allied occupation authorities banned all sword production in Japan. By 1950, the complete knowledge of the traditional craft existed in the memories of a handful of old men. Nowhere else. What saved it was a deliberate, organized, and urgent effort that began in 1954 when restrictions were lifted. The Japanese government began designating master swords as national cultural properties. The Society for the Preservation of Japanese Art Swords was established. Surviving masters were located, documented, and formally asked to teach before they died. The Tatara furnaces were rebuilt and relit. Today, approximately 300 licensed swordsmiths practice the traditional craft in Japan. The knowledge survived. But if that effort had begun 10 years later, there would have been no one left to preserve it from. The third loss, European armor. The story of European armor is the most complete loss of the three, and the one that happened for the hardest reason to fight. Not war. Not political change. Not or depletion. It happened because the knowledge became unnecessary. Between the 14th and 16th centuries, plate armor from the great workshops of Europe, particularly from Milan, the Massalia family, and later from Augsburg and Greenwich, represented technology that was genuinely ahead of its time. Modern analysis of surviving pieces using X-ray and ultrasound mapping has revealed something remarkable. The metal thickness across a full harness was not uniform. It was calculated. Thicker precisely where strikes were statistically most likely to land. Thinner in areas where the armor needed to flex with the body's movement, all while maintaining enough structural integrity to protect the man inside. The surfaces were not polished purely for appearance. The angles and curves of the plates were designed to deflect incoming blows, not by stopping force directly, but by redirecting it away from the body. Think of the shape of a car's windshield. A flat surface placed at 90 degrees catches full impact directly. A surface angled correctly sends that same impact sliding past. The Milanese armorers had understood and applied this principle in the 1380s. The physics to formally describe it came centuries later, and the fitting process was extraordinary in its precision. A full commission involved measurements taken at dozens of points across a client's body, producing a suit engineered to move with that specific person's specific proportions. A correctly fitted suit of plate armor did not restrict movement the way popular culture shows us. Period sources describe armored knights mounting horses unassisted, grappling on foot, recovering from falls. Because the weight was distributed across the body correctly, the same principle behind how a well-designed backpack feels lighter than a shoulder bag carrying identical weight. Then came firearms. The transition was slow, more than a century. But as guns improved in range, power, and affordability, the calculation changed. A master armorer's full commission took 12 months to produce and cost the equivalent of a small estate. A musket could penetrate it at combat range. By the early 1600s, the great armoring centers had closed. No clients meant no apprentices. No apprentices meant no one to transmit the knowledge to. And within a single generation, men who had grown up watching the finest technical craft in Europe died without having passed it forward. Because there had seemed to be no reason to hurry. Why knowledge dies? The four mechanisms. By now the pattern is clear. The knowledge of the masters didn't disappear through one cause. It disappeared through four distinct mechanisms, and every one of them is still operating today. The first is material dependency. Some knowledge is permanently attached to specific raw materials. When the Damascus ore ran out, the technique that depended on its chemistry became unrepeatable, regardless of skill, regardless of effort. The knowledge was real. The material that made it work was gone. The second is structural collapse. Knowledge doesn't exist independently of the society carrying it. It lives inside structures, guilds, schools, family lineages, economic systems that make practice financially viable. The Japanese swordsmiths survived for centuries because three interlocking structures supported them. When those structures fell simultaneously, the knowledge nearly fell with them. The third is the danger of protective secrecy. The masters kept their best techniques secret because those techniques were their competitive advantage. A Milanese armorer who shared his exact steel tempering process was handing his livelihood to a competitor. Secrecy made sense during normal times. But it meant the knowledge had no redundancy. It existed in one place, inside one person or one family. And when that person died without a successor, the knowledge died with them. The fourth is technological displacement, moving faster than documentation. When industrial steel mills made small crucible furnace operations economically unviable in the 1850s, the craftsmen who ran those furnaces did not sit down and write technical manuals. They found new employment in the industries that were replacing them. Within 30 years, knowledge refined across 3 centuries was effectively inaccessible. The same pattern happened with master bowyers when firearms ended military archery. With hand engravers of ceremonial armor when mass production made decorated pieces economically marginal. With siege engineers when gunpowder changed what defensive walls were supposed to do. Every time the market disappeared faster than documentation could happen, the knowledge went with it. What is being recovered and how? This is not only a story of loss. It is also, slowly and imperfectly, a story of recovery. On the Damascus front, metallurgist J.D. Verhoeven spent years analyzing historical blades and running controlled experiments with crucible steel production, attempting to trigger genuine internal carbide patterning, not by folding layers together from the outside, but by creating the chemical conditions for the pattern to grow from within the steel. The results have not perfectly replicated a historical piece, but they have produced steel with authentic internal patterning, formed through chemistry and thermal control, not mechanical layering. Enough to confirm that the original process is not mystical, not accidental, and not beyond reach. Just dependent on conditions we are still learning to fully recreate. In Japan, the 300 licensed swordsmiths working today are doing something the old masters never thought necessary. They are documenting everything. The old masters had no reason to write instructions, because knowledge transmitted through a decade of daily physical practice doesn't need words. Your hands absorb what your teacher's hands show you. The body learns what the mind cannot hold in language. But the modern world has demonstrated repeatedly that bodies are mortal and records are not. Today, institutions like the Bison Osifune Sword Museum are filming complete forging sequences, analyzing steel samples with spectrometers, measuring temperatures that old masters judged by eye and ear, and building a documented record that could survive the death of every individual practitioner. In Europe, a serious and growing community of historical armorers has spent decades reconstructing lost techniques, using surviving museum pieces as physical evidence, cross-referencing period technical manuals and inventory records, and sharing findings across national boundaries in ways the original guild system structurally prevented. The result is functional armor built on historically verified principles, that moves the way period sources say it should move, and holds up under the physical testing that historical combat research now conducts systematically. And perhaps the most unexpected development in all of this is this. Modern scientific analysis is revealing things about historical pieces that the masters themselves never consciously understood. The masters knew their results. They knew what good steel felt like, what a correct quench sounded like, what properly tempered metal did under stress. We are learning the physics and chemistry that produced those results. Which means that in some specific and measurable ways, we now understand the science behind what they were doing more precisely than they understood it themselves. What we cannot replicate is the 20 years of daily physical practice that made their hands capable of executing it. That gap is the real frontier, and the people working to close it deserve more attention than they usually receive. The knowledge of the masters of the past was not lost through carelessness. It was lost because this kind of knowledge has always had one fundamental vulnerability. It lives in people, not in objects. The sword in the museum is evidence that the knowledge existed. It is not the knowledge itself. The knowledge lived in the moment when a master placed a student's hand near the forge, not touching, just close enough to feel the heat gradient, and said, "When the air feels like this, the metal is ready." No document captures that. No description fully replaces it. No photograph of the finished blade tells you what the master felt in that moment. When the last person carrying that knowledge dies without transmitting it, it doesn't go anywhere. It simply stops existing. What the people working today to preserve these traditions understand is that they are not just making beautiful objects. They are maintaining a continuous thread of human capability, one that connects the present to knowledge built across centuries, and keeping that thread intact long enough to pass it to the next person. That is genuinely difficult work. It is expensive, slow, and often invisible to the wider world. And it matters in ways that go far beyond swords and armor. Because the mechanisms that killed this knowledge are the same mechanisms operating on other traditional crafts right now, in every part of the world. If you want to go deeper into any part of what we covered today, this channel has dedicated videos on the specific chemistry of wood steel, the full Tamahagane process from raw iron sand to finished blade, and the biomechanics of how articulated Gothic armor actually moves on a human body. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the next video goes directly into the forge, and focuses on one of the most remarkable skills in the entire Japanese tradition, reading the color of fire. A master swordsmith judges the temperature of steel by the exact shade of light it produces, from black through deep red, orange, yellow, and into white, with a precision that modern instruments have since confirmed is accurate to within 10 or 15 degrees Celsius. Done by eye, in a dark forge, after 20 years of practice. We'll break down exactly how that works and why it matters for the quality of the final blade. See you there.